taco shop where we have the header H1 for each page. Scroll to the top of the hours and we'll see what we have here. It says the little taco shop hours. So we'll go ahead and remove the and hours, save that file. The contact page, drag this back to the right. So I'm going to, I think we want our header to be consistent and say little taco shop no matter which page we go to. So let's go ahead and make those changes as well in the HTML as we go back to the code. So I'm going to close this back out, drag this back to the right, and bring the code over to the full screen. Quickly going to each HTML page, we'll make sure that the heading matches. So it should just say little taco shop where we have the header H1 for each page. Scroll to the top of the hours and we'll see what we have here. It says the little taco shop hours. So we'll go ahead and remove the and hours, save that file. The contact page said contact us. Well, we would prefer it still say little taco shop here. And of course the H2s will handle the other labels on the page. So we had our location, and below that we should also have the contact form as well. There we go. Let's see what was here. Yep, our contact form. So that looks good. And the about HTML should also just say little taco shop, and it does. And of course the titles of the page say more about the page as well. So about the little taco shop here, the title at the top of this is contact us LTS. I guess to keep consistency we could say about LTS on this other page, as we're going with that abbreviation several places. So about LTS. There, the description can still say about the little taco shop. And then hours, let's see what the title is here. LTS hours, that's great. And of course for the index we want the title to be the little taco shop. So everything is looking good once again in the HTML. Let's go back to the CSS and start working on the menu. Now before applying styles to the menu, I want to pull up an MDN reference. So I'm just going to paste this link in and I'll make sure it is in the course materials as well, so the course resources. But here on the grid layout and accessibility page in MDN, it says grid and the dangers of markup flattening. So what we're going to be doing is taking the HTML table that's in the index page that comprises the menu that is displayed, and we're going to make it a grid. Too often, many people just use div elements to make their grid, and a grid needs that flat structure essentially for the grid items, so it can review or refer to each grid item in that regard, because it's not going to look at subgrid items. Subgrid is a proposal they're discussing here, but it's not implemented as well. So we want to avoid that danger. I'm going to pull the code back over and bring up the index.html, and we can see our table. And right now, the table is not flat. Notice how it has parent elements like the T head element and of course table row elements, and then inside we get the TH and TD elements for those table cells, whether they're a header element or they're just a table data element. And so grid doesn't work that way. It needs flat elements, but we can still work with this. We don't want to remove the semantic markup of a table. To further illustrate my point, instead of just having this here underneath, I'm going to paste in what you might see a table constructed of for a grid using divs. Now this is a flattened markup table essentially that would be applied to grid. And notice how I just used divs and applied all of these classes. And this is what you do not want to do. But I guarantee you will probably see this somewhere when a grid is applied and you see a table on the page. I'm going to press Control Z though, because this once again is not what we want to do. And you can tell by this markup, it is not flattened. However, there is a solution for this, and it is a display setting that we can put in the CSS that will help us convert our table to a grid. I'm going to drag this back to the left so we can look at one more web page, and I will link to this as well in the course resources. And it's the Can I Use web page, and I'm looking at display contents. Notice what it says about display contents. It causes an element's children to appear as if they were the direct children of the element's parent. Essentially, that ignores that parent element, and that will flatten the elements for grid to use without removing those elements. So we just need to put display contents on some of these parent elements that grid will not use. It says this can be a useful or this can be useful when a wrapper element should be ignored when using CSS grid or similar layout techniques. And then when we scroll and look at everything as far as how well it is applied, now let me pull this out to the full page so we can see everything from Can I Use. You can see it's got basically 95% acceptance here, and we're not going to worry about Internet Explorer again, and most every other major browser is accepting that use here. Opera Mini is one that's not, and UC Browser for Android, but Chrome, Safari on iOS, Chrome for Android, we're good in almost every major use case here. So I'm comfortable with using that as we switch our HTML table over to a grid. And again, I will link to both of those for you. Back to our website here, back to the right, and now I will pull this back over to look at our code in a full screen so we can get the ideas of what we're doing with the table. As I did with the contact and about pages, I applied a separate class here to refer to as the parent, and I'm going to do the same here. It's going to be the menu class. And then I will refer to these, again, with BEM notation, but I'm going to refer to menu as the parent. So here we're going to have a class. I'm going to set this equal to menu, 2 underscores, and h2 for our menu heading. Then the table itself, say class, and then menu, 2 underscores, and container, because this is going to contain our menu. For the caption for the table, we'll use this class and set this to off screen, our utility class once again, as we will not want to view this caption on the page, but we do want to retain it for accessibility. Now we will be setting the table head and the TR element, the table body element, and the table foot element to that display contents. So grid actually ignores those. The content we want for the grid and the content that we actually want screen readers to read will be inside of the TH and TD elements. So that's where we'll apply the classes here. So all of the opening THs that we have here, I'm going to select 3 right there, and we might even have a 4th, but I think we just want 3 right now for the menu headers. So I'll take this over with the arrow to the right, and I'll say class equals, and this is going to be menu, 2 underscores, and header. Now something else I want to do here, one thing I noticed, and I must have done this in the HTML course as well, so if you went through that, you can apply the scope column to this first cell as well, and I'm not sure why I didn't before. It might have just been an oversight. The second thing is we were looking once again at how to do abbreviations in HTML, but I want the full word quantity here now, so I must have done this in the HTML course as well. So if you went through that, you can apply the scope column to this first cell as well. And I'm not sure why I didn't before. It might have just been an oversight. The second thing is we were looking once again at how to do abbreviations in HTML, but I want the full word quantity here now. So I'm going to remove the abbreviation and just have the word quantity in the second TH cell for the table. Okay, after we have got the menu headers, now we're going to have menu item classes. So we will come through here, and then whether it is the TH or the TD in these other cells, I'm going to make it a menu item. So I'm going to start off with the remainder of these table data cells, because there are several. I'm pressing Control D to get all of them selected. And I think that's going to be it. Nope, one more maybe. There we go, one more. So at the end of that, I'll arrow to the right, I'll put class, and I'm going to set this equal to menu, 2 underscores, and item. Okay, scrolling back up to where we have the crunchy, and then of course we have the soft label down here. We're going to apply classes here as well. I'll have a class. I'm going to set this equal to menu, 2 underscores, item, and then I want a second class here that is just going to be menu, 2 underscores, and CR for crunchy, as we'll need to refer to that later for the grid possibly. And then menu, 2 underscores, and CR for crunchy, as we'll need to refer to that later for the grid possibly. And then for soft, we're going to do the same thing. So it's going to be a class equals menu, 2 underscores, item, and then menu 2_SF for soft. And finally, let's scroll down to the very bottom where we have chips and salsa. It spans 3 columns. So besides menu item here, I also want menu 2_ in CS. And I believe I have now applied all of the classes that I wanted to apply for the menu itself. One other thing I am going to do while I'm here in the HTML is remove this line break, and then we have a paragraph here, and I'm going to apply our utility class of center to this paragraph that has our back to top link that should appear underneath the table. Let's go back to our style sheet and let's drag this to the left so we can see changes applied to the table now as we apply these styles. I'll start by scrolling up so we can start at the very top of our available space, and I'm going to put in a label for the style sheet for the menu. Now underneath this, the first thing I'm going to do is select the T head element, the T body element, the T foot element, and the TR element. And this is the only table in the project, so I feel safe doing this without classes. If it was a larger project, I might have made a display contents class and then applied this to that class to each one of these elements. So here I'm going to say display contents. It also took those parents out of the flow. So now, even though they're still in the page, it made them all run into one line. So we will definitely see changes now as we make the table. So, or the grid, I should say. Let's create that menu container class. If you remember, this is applied to the table element itself. So we'll say display grid, and if I save after each change, we should definitely see changes as we go. So now just by applying display grid, it changed how that viewed after our display contents was applied. Now let's say grid-template-columns, and we're going to use the repeat function. We want 3 columns, each with 1 fragment. So let's save now, and we once again see changes to that table. Now template-columns, and we're going to use the repeat function. We want 3 columns, each with 1 fragment. So let's save now, and we once again see changes to that table. Now let's go ahead and map out our grid template areas. But we really haven't assigned any specific classes like those that we applied to Crunchy or Soft, so it might still look a little strange when we do this. Essentially, though, we only need to assign the labels to the ones that are going to take up more than 1 grid square. So in other words, I can just kind of create the other labels without assigning them to elements. So I'm going to have HD1, HD2, and HD3. I won't end up assigning those to classes at all. Then I'm going to have CR1, this is Crunchy, as you might guess, the abbreviation HD was for header, and then Crunchy1 price for 1 taco. Now I'm just going to Control-Alt and the down arrow a couple of times because 1 here is going to get changed. changed to 2, and then 1 here is going to get changed to 3. Okay, after that, let's create one line here for soft. So we'll have soft taco, soft 1, and then soft 1 price. After that, Shift Alt down arrow, Shift Alt down arrow, select 1, Control D, change those to a 2, select 1, Control D, change those to a 3, and save. And so now we have the crunchy rows and the soft rows and the header. So at the very end, we're going to have the chips and salsa row. So CS, 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 because it had a row span of 3. After that, we have essentially mapped out those grid areas. It doesn't look like we want it to yet, but because we haven't assigned that crunchy label to the crunchy label that we, or class that we have, and the soft label to the soft class, or the chips and salsa label to that class. So we still need to add those. Likewise, let's go ahead and add a small gap, 0.1 EM. So as we discussed before, that could be as small as 1.6 pixels or about as large as 2.4, depending on the font size applied. Then let's give a margin bottom of 1 EM as well. Well, now let's apply some of those labels so our grid looks. Looks a little bit better. So we'll start out with the menu 2 underscores CR for crunchy, and here we'll apply the grid area label of CR. When we save, we don't see much of a change yet, but I hope to in the near future. Menu 2 underscores and SF for soft, and here we'll say grid area SF. Save again, so we see a little bit more of a change, and then we'll say area SF. Save again, so we see a little bit more of a change, and then we'll say menu 2 underscores CS. This will be grid area CS, and save. We definitely have seen some changes in the grid. It's not what we want yet, but we're getting there. Let's make the color and save. We definitely have seen some changes in the grid. It's not what we want yet, but we're getting there. Let's make the color here a var dash dash highlight color for this. Okay, so we've got a chips and salsa that is now green, and then we'll say font weight bold as well, and save. That looks good. Now let's go ahead and apply some of this to the other areas as well. So let's say menu 2 underscores CR and menu 2 underscores SF. Here I'm going to take these two And maybe I should have organized this differently, my thought pattern, but I want both of those there as well. However, there's also some other styles. So I want a height of 100% as it takes up some of that extra space. Why is that not applying to Crunchy? I may have to go back and see what I did wrong there. But let's go ahead and say these are also grids. And then we want to place the content center, which is the point of making them a grid, so we can do that. Yes, the Crunchy style is not being applied. So we have menu CR, and that is what needs to be applied there. Let's go back and look at our HTML and see if that class was applied properly to the CR section. Oh, it's just 1 underscore, it needs to be 2. Save, and now go back to style and bring this over, and now Crunchy and Soft both have that same style, and everything is aligned better. That makes more sense as to why it wasn't coming together quite as quickly as I expected. And before we move on, let's see if we could apply this differently. Now we still need the grid area here for menu CS, but we could possibly remove these, and let's see if we could include the .menu 2 underscore CS without really making something strange there. I think that's fine, and it's a little more efficient. We aren't repeating those 2 lines. And now let's look at these headers, and we could possibly add those in as well. So one more comma, and we'll say menu 2 underscores header. Look at these headers, and we could possibly add those in. As well. So one more comma, and we'll say menu 2 underscores header and save. And yes, I think that style is going to work as well. However, we still need menu 2 underscores header because we want to add a border dash bottom to each of those. So we'll say var and bring in our border to add a border as well. However, we still need menu 2 underscores header because we want to add a border dash bottom to each of those. So we'll say var and bring in our border. Variable that we have created and save. So now we have a border across each one of those headings. Now let's scroll for some more room, and we're going to select that menu header again. I can spell menu 2 underscores header, and then we also want menu 2 underscores item. Now for both of these, we want a width of 100%, and then we'll set a padding to 1 EM, and let's put a border, and then let's set medium, ridge, and we'll set the var equal to border. Color. There we go. And when we save that, we've got borders around everything. So in that regard, maybe we could remove that border bottom and still be good. And we save, yes, and it looks the same. So one was just overriding the other. And now let's select just the menu items. And here we'll put a display of grid. And we will once again place the content in the center. And when we save, that looks good as well. Now, we didn't apply that above to the menu item where we set the same grid and center because we also really didn't want to apply these other styles to those menu items. We wanted to keep them this separate color and not have the font be bold. But that's looking pretty good right now as far as converting this menu table and leaving that semantic HTML in place. We can apply some final touches to this menu as well. But earlier when we were referencing the border radius property, we said we were only doing it twice, and therefore I didn't go ahead and create a variable. But now I want to use it again, and so now that I'm using it in another place, I definitely do want to create that variable. So I'm going to scroll back up to the variable section, and underneath borders, I'm going to create a border-radius variable and just set that to 15 pixels. So now that I've created that, we can use that variable in all of the places that we are applying a border radius. So now let's go ahead and change. Change these two that currently exist to var-border radius. There we go. And save that so no other changes will be made there. But now we can apply these final touches to our menu table as well, and we can use that border radius property. Now, I could apply classes to the header and the footer, but I'm not. And they are being ignored for some things concerning the grid when we set that to display contents. However, they are still part of the document, so we can still use them for selectors. So I'm going to select the T head and then the TH inside of the T head and say the first child, which should be the very first cell that says tacos. And here we're going to set the border-top-left-radius. And now we'll use our border radius variable once again. And when we save, we can see this now has the border radius of 15 pixels. So likewise, I'm going to just copy this down so I don't have to retype everything. Shift-Alt and the down arrow. This is going to be the T-head, TH last child, and instead of the top left, it's going to be the top right. Everything else should be the same, and now we see that same border radius applied over here to the right. Finally, we have this one large chips and salsa cell along the bottom of this table for the menu. So here, this will be the T foot, and then we'll select the table data cell inside. Here we can set the border-bottom-left- radius, and this will once again be var border and use that border radius variable. And once we save this, we see that applied to the left corner, so it just needs to be applied to the right corner. So inside this same Same selector here for T-foot TD, we can now also apply this to the right corner and save. And there we have our rounded corners for our table as well. We're getting near the end, but there is a little more to do. Let's go ahead and look at the page in full screen or at the full site now. And here's our back to top. We can click. We have the smooth scrolling that goes there. We can go to the hours page. Everything looks pretty good there. The contact form, everything is good here. The about page and the trivia, that's all working well. And our animation shows here. Let's look by Shift, Control, and the letter I to go into a mobile view. Notice how well our grid conforms. It automatically adapts. We didn't have to apply a media query. The grid just works in this mobile view, and that's great. Let's look at some other views. Here's a little bit maybe larger phone. There we go. So it is quite a bit larger. It is the iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus. And there we'll size it down to 75%. Let's go ahead and look at the iPhone X that gets taller, so that should also make our text just a little larger based on how we used clamp with that. Everything's still looking pretty good. The form still adapts to the screen size. The menu looks good, and it took us right to the menu when I clicked the menu link. The about page, the hours, all is looking pretty good. I think we could apply possibly a little bit of space or a class we might have to back to the top that we applied down here. I think we at least centered it, so we might change something there. But overall, it's good to just evaluate your project and see how everything looks to you as you go. And you can tell it's looking good on mobile as well. So let's go back to full screen view, and we're going to make just a couple of changes. There is one media query I would like to apply to this project, although using modern CSS, for the most part, we've been able to avoid media queries. We are going to put this media query at the bottom of the page. So we'll say at media, and then we'll say screen, and now say min width, and we'll say 576 pixels. Which is our small breakpoint, and that is similar to what Bootstrap uses, the CSS library or framework, if you will. And here we have header, 2 underscores H1. Now let's select the pseudo element here, and this is the before pseudo element. And we're going to set some content on this H1. Let's give a space, and what I want to do is put a taco emoji in here. And actually I want to put the taco emoji and then the space. So we have a taco space and then we have the heading. As you might expect, I also want to do this with the after. So I will just copy that down. Again, Shift Alt and the down arrow. We'll switch before to after. And now with the after, we want the space to come first and then the taco. So we've got taco space, heading space, taco. So this should show up on any screen that's larger than 576 pixels in width. So when we save, now we have tacos in the heading as well. And that's a great addition for the little taco shop. And it applies to all the pages. pages where we set up our classes correctly. But if we go to a smaller screen where we might not be able to fit all of that in, they disappear, and that is great too. So it only shows in larger viewports. Let's go to an iPad. There we have the tacos. So just mobile, it will not try to squeeze those tacos in, and that is fine. Let's drag this back over. We can apply just a little bit more to the media query as well, and this is just something I want to do for the menu 2_ header. Then we're also going to have it in the menu 2_ CR, which was the crunchy, menu 2_ SF, which was the soft, and menu 2_ CS, which was the chips and salsa. We're going to set the font size to 125%, so just a little larger on these larger screens for the headings. You really, if you wanted to, you could do it to all of these, but I just really wanted to make the headings stand out, and so everything we've wrapped around here that you see in green has applied that larger font now, just another 25% larger than it was. There is one more media query to apply, but it's not based on the width. It's based on the preference of light and dark mode. We have styled our light mode. This would be our normal view. Viewing for the website, but many prefer dark mode these days, and that includes myself. So I definitely like to add dark mode when the preferences are set for that. So if your system preference is dark mode, that's what will display. My system preference is dark mode, so I'm going to put this media query directly under the variables we defined. So it will be applied right away, because all it really does is change the variables for those colors that we're using on the site. So I will say at media, put our parentheses, then put prefers dash color dash scheme, and here I'm going to say dark. So that is what my system is already set to. So anything we put in here will start to overwrite what we already have for those variables. So we need the root pseudo selector, it's a pseudo class, and now let's overwrite the background color, and this is going to be black. Now we will not really see the change here because we're not seeing that orange color until we drag this over to full screen. So if I save, drag this over to the full screen, now you can see it's dark, but it's still fading to that light orange because we haven't changed that other variable yet either. So let's change the BG color dash fade variable as well, and I'll just make that gray, just like my last name. Now save, and now let's drag this over once again. You can see it's fading to a gray instead of the orange to a light orange. The next color we'll put in here will be the header background color. Now we'll start to see these changes. So header BG color. Oh, I'm sorry, just header color, not BG color. Let's make this white smoke and save. And then let's go ahead and change the nav I said color, now I need background color. And by the way, the white smoke, I just find that to be easier on my eyes than the pure white that we've used in other spots. Let's set this to RGB 20, 20, 20, which is just a different shade of black, essentially. And now you can see that background color for the nav menu definitely got darker. Okay, so we're going to have to change that text eventually too. Let's set the hero color, and this is for our little animated art that drops down. So our hero color is going to be a different flat black. Now when it drops down, you can see that has also changed. Now let's set the body background color itself. So this will be a big change when we first see it. That will also be this flat black. And that has made a difference. Now let's go to the font color itself, which is what's being used on most of the page. And we'll go with that white smoke. That's just a little easier on the eyes than the pure bright white. And so let's find a page that's using, well, here we see it inside of these table cells here, but if we go look at a different page, you can see it is being used right here as well. Okay, after the font color, let's apply the highlight color. And where this was that green, let's use white smoke here as well. So when we save, I believe that's in the animation. And I'm not seeing that applied right now. I'm not seeing the animation because I'm not on the right page. Here we go. And oh no, it wasn't in the animation because that has the separate background color that is slightly transparent. But it is in some other areas, like we were using it for the H2s and H3s and the table headings. So we can see that's now using white smoke as well. Okay, now let's switch the border color that's being used. Let's also make that white smoke. Now our table is standing out, and now that border color was a bit of the shadow behind the lettering. So now we've got a little bit of white shadow behind Bienvenidos, and that stands out on that green as well, helping the dark lettering stand out. And we still need to change our link colors. So link-color, we'll make that white smoke. You can see we're really making use of that color for this setting. Also say link hover is now going to be orange. Then link active is going to be the lighter orange, so RGB 252, 200, 103, and save. So now when we hover over a link, it becomes orange. When I hold down, it's a lighter orange, and then we go to hours. Everything looks pretty good. Now you may have your own preferences for dark mode as well, but just scan over the site, see how you think it looks. Does everything look like you want it to? Oh, these buttons need a little bit of help yet. Let's check our other page and make sure everything else looks good, and then we might need to change something about those buttons. We'll have to see what is going on there, and that might be a correction that needs to be made in how they're initially being set as well. So let's find where we had a button, which was a context button, and you can see the header color, which remains white or white smoke was being used, but then that highlight color was the background, and that has changed. I think we need to change this from header color to button color and give us give ourselves some control over what color is the text on top of the buttons. So we've added a button color variable. Now we need to define that above, and then of course change it when it gets to dark mode as well. So we were fine with it at first when it was the same as the header color. So that's what we'll start off with, and I believe that is just white. So we'll put that and also put it in as white here. But now we need to change this when we get to dark mode. So let's bring this down into our dark mode definitions, add this, and let's change it to black right here and save. Now let's go ahead and go to our contact page, scroll down, and now we can see the text on our buttons. And so that looks good. The about page is looking good. Let's make sure the answer looks good for trivia. That's fine. Here's an additional link in our page to the reference for the trivia. The menu, we scroll right to that. Everything looks good there. Hours, pretty good. I still might want to create a little space here with the back to top, but other than that, it's fine. And back to the home. Okay, so we are down to the final touches of the project. So one of those things might be to organize the CSS. Now this is your own project, but if you were working in a team, for example, you might want to organize that. I'm going to drag this over to full screen for this discussion. Let's say the colors we have here. There's probably the largest list that we have of anything in the this project is the colors. It might help to just use the AB CSS technique here to organize these. So if we highlight all of those, press Control P, and then the greater than symbol, and now we might choose sort lines ascending. So now all of our colors are ordered alphabetically, and I can find them probably much faster now that I've done this. So considering that, maybe we should do the same thing for our dark mode, probably much faster now that I've done this. So now all of our, and then the greater than symbol, and now we might choose sort lines as ascending. So now all of our colors are ordered alphabetically, and I can find them probably much faster now that I've done this. So considering that, maybe we should do the same thing for our dark mode. We'll highlight all of those, Control P, greater than symbol, and choose sort lines ascending. Now you're welcome to do that for any or all of the properties and styles that are within this project if you so choose. Now before we finish this project, there's one more thing we can add that would be a very nice touch, but it is a preview of what's to come for you yet, and that's because it's a touch of JavaScript, just a little bit, and I'll show you what it does. It will update the year, so it will put in the current year no matter what year it is, and you will not have to come back and update the copyright on your site. So let's put in a time element right here. I want lowercase, so I'll give this a time with an ID attribute of year. So there is our time element, and we don't really need to put anything in it. We'll just leave it as is with the ID of year right there. Now let's go over to our file tree, and inside the file tree, let's create a JS folder. And inside the JS folder, let's create a new file, name it main.js. Now we only have a few simple lines to put in here, so I'm going to type const, which will help me define a variable, and I'm going to name that variable year. I'm going to set that equal to document, and when I refer to document, I am referring to the HTML document. And then get element by ID, and this will be year. So we just set that attribute, and then we are selecting it. So we're selecting that time element on whichever page we load this JavaScript into. From there, I'm going to define another variable, and I want it to be called this year. Notice I'm using camel case to define that. I'm going to set this equal to a new date, and then I'm going to call the get full year method for that date. So now I have the current full year in the this year variable, and I have the element that we just created, the time element, in the year variable. So I'm going to say year set attribute, and then I'm going to select date time, and I'm going to set it to the this year variable. And then to display it on the page, I once again want that year element, and now I'm going to select the text content, that's what's displayed on the page, and set it equal to this year, and save. That's all I need, are these 4 lines of code. And with that, we can import this into our page. So we'll go back to the index. Let's scroll to the top because we want to load the JavaScript last after the CSS. And we do that with a script tag, and it will have a source attribute. And there it is. So we'll say JS slash, and then we'll just pick our main JS. Nothing goes between the opening and closing script tags. However, you have to put it this way. It always has a closing script tag. It's not like some of the other elements that just has a slash to close out the first one. You always see it this way. We want to add one other attribute though, and that is defer. And that tells the script to wait until everything else is loaded before loading the JavaScript. And we will save. Now, if we go back to our page, notice it says copyright 2022, Little Taco Shop. If you're watching this in a different year and you add the same code, it will say whatever the current year is there. And if we go to our other pages, notice it still just says copyright symbol, and Little Taco Shop, because we haven't added that JavaScript to the other pages yet. But we can do that now. So let's drag this over. And we also need to make that same change to the footer on every page. So inside of our copyright line here that has the span class, let's select that with the C, and then we'll go to the hours page, scroll down, and we will select the same line and paste in the new line and save. The contact page, scroll down, select the copyright line, paste in the new line and save. And we also need the about page, I believe. So now let's scroll down, and here we'll select that same copyright line and we'll paste in the new line. But we haven't added the JavaScript yet. So let's go back to our index.html. Now we could just copy the same script line and we can use the same JavaScript file for every page. So back to the hours page, paste it in underneath our style sheet line. Back to the contact page, we should do the exact same thing. And then finally, the about page, we should do the exact same thing. And save. And now let's once again look at our site and notice that no matter which page we're on, we now have the year referenced in the footer. Along with our copyright notice. And everything looks just as it should. Okay, guys, just a few closing notes, and you could call them corrections if you want to. I just want to adjust a couple of things. We're currently on the hours page for the Little Taco Shop, and I previously forgot to put in an H2 for this page. So I'm going to do that here on line 48, and I'm just going to put hours in there and save. Something else that's been bothering me about this page the whole time was the back to the top link that we really don't need anymore. There's not enough content on this page for it really to even be there. So I'm going to remove that back to the top link on the hours page. Other than that, I'm happy with how this page turned out. Of course, everything is preference when it comes to CSS. Your design choices, your preferences may be different than mine, so feel free to make your own changes. Also, at the contact.html page, I previously removed every HR, the horizontal rule element, but I think I'd like to put one back here just between the two sections on this page, or between the two articles, if you will. So I'm going to put this horizontal rule back between those two different articles on this one page. One other thing I want to do is just change the text a little bit on the buttons. So I'm going to click the file tree quickly, go to the style.css file, and here under the contact_button class, I'm just going to add a font weight of bold and save. And now once we look at these buttons, I just like how they look a little bit better with the bold font. Always go back and reevaluate your code. Make your own choices, and of course you don't have to agree with my choices. The best way to learn is experiment and see how it works out for you. So that's the end of the project. Congratulations. You've completed a large overhaul on the Little Taco Shop website and styled it with modern CSS. Very few media queries necessary. We added a nice animation, and it does work in mobile devices as well, even though we didn't need those extra media queries. So if we go back to an iPhone 6, 7, and 8 style, we can now see how all of this looks in a dark mode, and it is still working as we expect it to. Great job completing the project and completing the full CSS for Beginners course. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection, and a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you, and thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day. Only numeric data types, the plus operator performs a math. Let's get started with JavaScript. We're going to use the Chrome browser in this tutorial. In the Chrome address bar, type about:blank, and you will get a blank web page. From there, you can right-click on the page and choose Inspect from the pop-up menu. Or you can press the Control, Shift, and I keys at the same time to open Chrome DevTools. With Chrome DevTools now open, we have a web page on the left, and your DevTools window may not be expanded as far as mine at first, but you can adjust that by just pulling the bar over like this. This makes the web page a small column on the left of the screen, and the DevTools are open on the right. You can see the Elements tab is selected. Let's change that by clicking the Console tab. And just to make the display a little less bright, let's go into Settings and choose the Dark theme. That took us back to the Elements tab, so let's choose the Console tab again. Now we can type some JavaScript directly into the console. Let's start out with JavaScript comments and data types. A JavaScript comment starts with 2 slashes. We can leave comments in our code when we want to leave a note for ourselves, or if we're working on a team with other developers. JavaScript comments are simply notes. Now let's get into JavaScript data types. There are 4 basic data types that you will work.
हे व्हाट्स अप गाइस, अनुज हियर और आज हम बनाने वाले हैं एक होम पेज बाय यूजिंग HTML एंड CSS। एक वेबसाइट का होम पेज बनाने वाले हैं। ये वेबसाइट हम क्लोन करने वाले हैं। इसके अंदर सारी की सारी चीज़ें हैं। आपको ऊपर एक बैनर दिखाई देगा, देन एक नैव बार दिखाई देगा, कंपनी सेक्शन के नीचे हमारे पास है ये एक फीचर्स सेक्शन। इस फीचर सेक्शंस के नीचे हमारे पास एक और सेक्शंस हैं, जैसे इन हम कह सकते हैं बिग फीचर सेक्शन। इन बिग फीचर सेक्शंस को मैंने अलग अलग सेक्शंस में बना दिया, तो ये सब के सब अपने खुद के सेक्शंस हैं। आप चाहो तो एक पूरा बड़ा सेक्शन बना के उसके नीचे अंदर बहुत सारे डिव्स बना सकते हो, बट मैंने इस वेबसाइट के डिज़ाइन में इन सबको एक अलग अलग सेक्शंस में डिवाइड कर दिया है। एंड देन वी हैव दिस अनदर सेक्शन, विल कॉल दिस एग्जाम्पल्स सेक्शन, जहाँ पर आप देख सकते हैं कि कुछ कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स इन्होंने दिए हुए हैं। इसके बाद वी हैव दिस CTA सेक्शन। इसके बाद आपका यूजुअल सा फुटर सेक्शन है ये। एंड देन फुटर सेक्शन के नीचे भी हमारे पास एक सब फुटर सेक्शन है। तो ये सारे के सारे सेक्शंस हमें अपनी वेबसाइट के अंदर बनाने हैं। तो सबसे पहले ऐसा करते हैं, अपनी HTML पर मैंने एक फोल्डर बना लिया। इसके अंदर हमारे पास एक index.html एंड स्टाइल CSS है। index.html के अंदर हम अपना कोड करने वाले हैं। तो एक्सक्लेमेशन मार्क एंड देन हिट टैब, इससे हमारा कुछ बॉयलर प्लेट कोड आ जाएगा। इसके अंदर हम कुछ भी टाइटल दे सकते हैं। मैं यहाँ पे देता हूँ माई वेबसाइट। इसके बाद हम थोड़ा सा बेसिक सेटअप करेंगे अपनी वेबसाइट बनाने से पहले, ठीक है, कि हमारे कौन से आइकन्स चाहिए, कहाँ से हमारे पास फॉन्ट्स आने चाहिए, ठीक है। ये सारे कुछ बेसिक सेटअप होते हैं, उनको हम पहले करेंगे अपनी वेबसाइट के अंदर मूव करने से पहले। तो सबसे पहले हमें आइकन्स चाहिए, तो आइकन्स के लिए हम यूज करेंगे फॉन्ट ऑसम वेबसाइट का, तो fontawesome.com/kits। तो अगर आपका fontawesome.com पे अकाउंट नहीं बना हुआ है तो आपको पहले अपना अकाउंट बना लेना है, और अकाउंट अपना वेरीफाई करने के बाद आपके पास ऐसा एक प्रोफाइल पेज होगा जिसके अंदर आपको अपनी मैनेज और किट्स पे जाना है। तो अपने अकाउंट्स में से आप जाएंगे मैनेज किट्स के अंदर, और उसके बाद ये आपकी किट है, इस पर अगर आप क्लिक करोगे तो आपको ऐसी एक स्क्रिप्ट मिल जाएगी जिसको आपको बस कॉपी करना है और अपने कोड के अंदर बॉडी के अंदर पेस्ट कर देना, ठीक है। तो बॉडी यहाँ पर खत्म हो रही है, उससे जस्ट ऊपर वाली लाइन में हमने अपना ये फॉन्ट ऑसम की स्क्रिप्ट पेस्ट कर दिया, सो दैट हम अब अपनी वेबसाइट के अंदर आइकन यूज कर पाएंगे फॉन्ट ऑसम के। इसके बाद हमें चाहिए कुछ फॉन्ट्स, तो उसके लिए आएंगे fonts.google.com के अंदर, और यहाँ पर मैं दो टाइप के फॉन्ट यूज करने वाला हूँ। जितने भी मेरी हेडिंग्स हैं उनके अंदर हमारा पॉपिंस फॉन्ट यूज होगा, और जो भी मेरे पैराग्राफ्स हैं उनके अंदर रोबोटो फॉन्ट यूज होगा। तो ये फॉन्ट हम लिखाएंगे यहाँ से, तो आप सर्च कर सकते हैं, यहाँ पर हमारे पास रोबोटो फॉन्ट है, एंड हम सर्च कर सकते हैं पॉपिंस, तो हमें पॉपिंस फॉन्ट मिल जाएगा। इसका मैंने 400 और 700 वेरिएंट दोनों का सेलेक्ट कर लिया, तो 400 और 700, एंड देन रोबोटो का भी 400 एंड 700। हम यूज करेंगे फॉन्ट ऑसम वेबसाइट का, तो fontawesome.com/kits। तो अगर आपका fontawesome.com अकाउंट नहीं बना हुआ है तो आपको पहले अपना अकाउंट बना लेना है, और अकाउंट अपना वेरीफाई करने के बाद आपके पास ऐसा एक प्रोफाइल पेज होगा जिसके अंदर आपको अपनी मैनेज और किट्स पे जाना है। तो अपने अकाउंट्स में से आप जाएंगे मैनेज किट्स के अंदर, और उसके बाद ये आपकी किट है, इस पर अगर आप क्लिक करोगे तो आपको ऐसी एक स्क्रिप्ट अकाउंट्स में से आप जाएंगे मैनेज किट्स के अंदर, और उसके बाद ये आपकी किट है, इस पर अगर आप क्लिक करोगे तो आपको ऐसी एक स्क्रिप्ट मिल जाएगी जिसको आपको बस कॉपी करना है और अपने कोड के अंदर बॉडी के अंदर पेस्ट कर देना, ठीक है। तो बॉडी यहाँ पर खत्म हो रही है, उससे जस्ट ऊपर वाली लाइन में हमने अपना ये फॉन्ट ऑसम की स्क्रिप्ट पेस्ट कर दिया, सो दैट हम अब अपनी वेबसाइट के अंदर आइकन यूज कर पाएंगे फॉन्ट ऑसम के। इसके बाद हमें चाहिए कुछ फॉन्ट्स, तो उसके लिए आएंगे fonts.google.com के अंदर, और यहाँ पर मैं दो टाइप के फॉन्ट यूज करने वाला हूँ। जितने भी मेरी हेडिंग्स हैं उनके अंदर हमारा पॉपिंस फॉन्ट यूज होगा, और जो भी मेरे पैराग्राफ्स हैं उनके अंदर रोबोटो फॉन्ट यूज होगा। तो ये फॉन्ट हम लिखाएंगे यहाँ से, तो आप सर्च कर सकते हैं, यहाँ पर हमारे पास रोबोटो फॉन्ट है, एंड हम सर्च कर सकते हैं पॉपिंस, तो हमें पॉपिंस फॉन्ट मिल जाएगा। इसका मैंने 400 और 700 वेरिएंट दोनों सेलेक्ट कर लिया, तो 400 और 700, एंड देन रोबोटो का भी 400 इसको हम करेंगे इंपोर्ट। अगर आप लोगों को नहीं पता कि कैसे फॉन्ट्स वगैरह इंपोर्ट किए जाते हैं तो फॉन्ट्स के ऊपर मैंने प्रॉपर डेडिकेट वीडियो बना रखी है, तो आप वो जाके देख सकते हैं। इसको हम करेंगे यहाँ पर कॉपी और इसको डाल देंगे अपनी style.css के अंदर इस तरीके से। हम अपनी style.css को कनेक्ट भी कर लेंगे यहाँ पर, तो लिंक टू css style.css। अब इसके बाद नेक्स्ट बारी आती है सारी की सारी इमेजेस लेके आने की, ठीक है। ये हमारी जो ओरिजिनल वेबसाइट है इसके अंदर बहुत सारी इमेजेस हैं जिसे हम कहते हैं एसेट्स। तो यूजुअली क्या होता है, आपको कोई डिजाइनर इमेजेस वगैरह लाके देता है जब भी आप किसी क्लाइंट के लिए वेबसाइट बना रहे होते हो तो। लेकिन अगर आप लोगों को ऐसे क्लोन करनी है वेबसाइट, तो उसके लिए हम यूज करेंगे एक बहुत ही शानदार एक्सटेंशन का, विच इज कॉल्ड CSS पर। ये मैंने यहाँ पर डाला भी हुआ है, ये हमारा क्रोम एक्सटेंशन है। इस पर आप क्लिक करोगे एंड देन यू हिट एसेट्स यहाँ पर, तो जितनी भी इसके अंदर इमेजेस हैं वो सारी सारी आपको एक साथ एक्सेस हो जाएंगी, ठीक है। और इनको आप एक साथ डाउनलोड कर सकते हो बाय क्लिकिंग ऑन दिस बटन एक्सपोर्ट ऑल। और यहाँ पर हमारी सारी सारी पर। ये मैंने यहाँ पर डाला भी हुआ है, ये हमारा क्रोम एक्सटेंशन है। इस पर आप क्लिक करोगे एंड देन यू हिट एसेट्स यहाँ पर, तो जितनी भी इसके अंदर इमेजेस हैं वो सारी सारी आपको एक साथ एक्सेस हो जाएंगी, ठीक है। और इनको आप एक साथ डाउनलोड कर सकते हो बाय क्लिकिंग ऑन दिस बटन एक्सपोर्ट ऑल। और यहाँ पर हमारी सारी सारी इमेजेस assets.zip के अंदर आ गई हैं। इसको आपको अनजिप करना है और उसके बाद आपके पास सारी सारी इमेजेस होंगी, इनको अपने प्रोजेक्ट के अंदर लेकर आना है आपको। तो ये हमारा प्रोजेक्ट फोल्डर है और इसके अंदर हम अपनी एसेट फोल्डर को कॉपी पेस्ट कर देंगे। ये हमारा एसेट फोल्डर यहाँ पे आ गया और अब ये हमारे प्रोजेक्ट के अंदर भी आ गया, एक्सपोर्ट के अंदर। ये बहुत सारी इमेजेस हैं जो भी वहाँ पर यूज हुई हैं और इन इमेजेस का हम यूज करेंगे अपनी वेबसाइट के अंदर, ठीक है। तो इस तरीके से एक साथ सारी सारी इमेजेस आपको एक साथ मिल जाएंगे। इतना कर लेने के बाद हम यहाँ पर कुछ बेसिक CSS डाल रहे होंगे जिसका हम यूज करेंगे अपनी वेबसाइट के अंदर। तो ये भी काम हम सबसे पहले कर लेना चाहिए। सबसे पहले हम यहाँ पाएंगे और कुछ रिसेट्स लगा देंगे, जैसे कि मार्जिन 0, पैडिंग भी 0 एंड बॉक्स साइजिंग को हम कर देंगे बॉर्डर्स कर रहे हैं या फिर कुछ पैडिंग हम यूज कर रहे हैं वो हमें बार बार ना लिखनी पड़े, राइट। तो सबसे पहले बनाएंगे प्राइमरी टेक्स्ट कलर और ये हमारा हो जाएगा #183B56। ये कुछ गुड प्रैक्टिसेस होती हैं सो दैट आप एक साथ पूरी की पूरी वेबसाइट के अंदर अपने कलर को चेंज कर सको। कभी भी अगर आपको बाद में कलर चेंज करना हो तो आप अलग अलग जगह पे जाके कलर को चेंज नहीं करोगे। आपको अगर प्राइमरी टेक्स्ट कलर कभी चेंज करना है, सेकेंडरी टेक्स्ट कलर चेंज करना है, तो आप एक साथ हर फॉन्ट फैमिली के बाद हम अपनी बॉडी के अंदर कुछ चीज़ें लिख रहे होंगे, फॉर एग्जांपल फॉन्ट फैमिली जो भी हम ऊपर से लेकर आए हैं, तो फॉन्ट फैमिली। तो पूरी वेबसाइट के अंदर जितने भी हमारी हेडिंग्स हैं H1 H2 H3 सब जगह पे हम पॉपिंस यूज़ करने वाले हैं, तो पॉपिंस सैंस सेरिफ, पॉपिंस नहीं मिला तो फॉल बैक टू सैंस सेरिफ, और जो भी हम कलर यूज़ करेंगे वो होगा हमारा प्राइमरी टेक्स्ट कलर। तो बाय यूजिंग दिस वेरिएबल फंक्शन, प्राइमरी टेक्स्ट कलर। और अब जितनी भी हमारी हेडिंग्स हैं उनको भी हम यहाँ पर स्टाइल देते हैं। तो बाय डिफॉल्ट हमारे H1 H2 इन सब कुछ ना कुछ फॉन्ट साइज मिला होता है, राइट। H1 को 2 EM मिला होता है, H2 को कुछ और EM मिला होता है, बट हम यहाँ पर थोड़ा थोड़ा सबको बड़ा कर देते हैं। तो हमारा H1 जो होगा उसका फॉन्ट साइज हो जाएगा 3 REM, हमारा H2 का फॉन्ट साइज हो जाएगा 2 REM। सिमिलरली हमारा एक H3 है और इसका हम फॉन्ट साइज कर देंगे 1.5 REM। तो यूजुअल से थोड़ा सा हमने बड़ा कर दिया सबको। इसके बाद हमारा जो पैराग्राफ है इसको हम फॉन्ट फैमिली भी चेंज कर देंगे इसकी। तो इसकी जो फॉन्ट फैमिली होगी रोबोटो एंड देन सेंस सेरिफ फॉल बैक। उसके बाद उसका फॉन्ट साइज चेंज कर देंगे। तो यूजुअली 1 रैम का होता है, 1 EM का होता है, हम इसको कर देंगे 1.25 REM। एंड देन जो कलर होगा इसका होगा सेकेंडरी टेक्स्ट कलर। और जो लाइन हाइट होगी इसकी वो भी हम थोड़ी सी बढ़ा देंगे, लाइन हाइट ऑफ 1.8 REM। इस तरीके से हमने हमारे जितने भी टैग्स हम यूज़ करने वाले हैं उनको यहाँ पर स्टाइल कर दिया। इसके बाद हमारे जितने भी हमारे एंकर टैग्स होंगे, बेसिकली ए टैग्स जितने भी होंगे उनको भी हम यहाँ पर कुछ स्टाइलिंग देते हैं। बाय डिफॉल्ट टेक्स्ट डेकोरेशन इसको मिला होता है अंडरलाइन, हम इसको नन कर देंगे सो दैट कुछ भी अंडरलाइन बन के ना आए। एंड देन जो डिस्प्ले होता है बाय डिफॉल्ट इनलाइन होता है, हम इसको कर देंगे इनलाइन ब्लॉक। ये कुछ ऐसी चीज़ें जो आप यूजुअली हर वेबसाइट के अंदर कर ही रहे होते हैं, वेबसाइट बनाने से पहले भी। तो ये हमने सारी चीज़ें यहाँ पर कर दी हैं सो दैट पहले से कुछ स्टाइलिंग हमारी वेबसाइट के अंदर आ जाएगी। अब हम स्टार्ट करते हैं। सारे सारे जो भी हमने सेक्शंस लिखे थे उन सेक्शंस को हम एक एक करके लेके आते हैं। तो दीज वर आर सेक्शंस, राइट। मैं दिखाता हूँ आपको, दीज वर आर सेक्शंस। तो हम एक एक करके इन सारे के सारे लिखे थे उन सेक्शंस को हम एक एक करके लेके आते हैं। तो दीज वर आर सेक्शंस, राइट। मैं दिखाता हूँ आपको, दीज वर आर सेक्शंस। तो हम एक एक करके इन सारे के सारे सेक्शंस को अपनी HTML के अंदर लेके आते हैं। सबसे पहले हम लेके आएंगे टॉप बैनर को। तो ये हमारा हो जाएगा डिव टॉप बैनर। उसके नीचे हमारे पास एक नैव बार, उसके नीचे है हमारे पास हीरो सेक्शन, ठीक है। तो ये हमारा एक हेडर हो सकता है। इस हेडर के नीचे हमारे पास है कंपनीज का सेक्शन, जो बहुत सारी कंपनीज आ रही थी, तो डॉट। उसके बाद हमारे पास एक फीचर सेक्शन है, उसके बाद हमारे पास काफी सारे बिग फीचर्स के सेक्शन है। तो एक फीचर्स सेक्शन एंड देन बहुत सारे डिफरेंट डिफरेंट अलग सेक्शन है विच आर कॉल्ड